Lena had lived her whole life inside the tall brick walls of the Old Town orphanage, a place that looked more like an unused school than a home. She had arrived there as a toddler, too young to remember who brought her or why she had been left. The only story the caretakers told her was that she had been found wrapped in a small blanket on the orphanage steps on a cold winter morning. No one ever came back to claim her, and no one ever asked about her again. For as long as she could remember, the orphanage had been her world. Growing up there was not easy, but Lena learned early how to survive quietly. She was not the loud or playful type of child who got attention. Instead, she stayed close to the corners, completing her chores and helping the other children when she could. While the younger ones clung to the caretakers for affection, Lena tried not to expect anything. She understood, even as a little girl, that she was one of many, and attention could not be divided equally in a place with so many needs. As the years passed, Lena watched dozens of children come and go. Families would visit the orphanage, looking for a child to adopt. They usually preferred the younger ones, those who still had chubby cheeks, bright smiles, and no memories of hardship. Those children left quickly, crying with happiness as they ran into their new parents' arms. Lena always watched from the staircase or through a half-open doorway, smiling for them even though a quiet ache settled in her chest each time. When she turned 10, she understood that fewer families chose older children. When she reached 13, the caretakers gently told her to stop hoping too much. By the time she turned 15, the younger kids no longer asked her if she thought she would be adopted soon. They knew the answer, and so did she. Still, Lena tried not to let sadness shape her. She poured her energy into helping around the orphanage. She swept the long hallways, washed the children's clothes, and learned to sew torn sleeves and replace missing buttons. She braided hair for the little girls before school and helped the small boys tie their shoelaces when they struggled. She never complained. The caretakers trusted her more than most and often said, "If only families were looking for a girl like you." But families didn't come looking for a girl like her. People in town whispered odd things about orphans, claims that they brought trouble, or that their unknown pasts made them unpredictable. None of it was true. But rumors were easier to spread than kindness. So Lena stayed where she was, finishing school through donated books and old worksheets, while working long hours inside and outside the orphanage. As she neared 18, many of the girls her age left the orphanage to marry. Some were taken in by families who arranged matches for them. Others found boys in town who were willing to marry them because they were cheerful, lively, or came from families that had known them for years. No one ever came forward for Lena. She was quiet, reserved, and kept to herself. People mistook her silence for strangeness when it was really just shyness. Some families took her in temporarily during harvest seasons. They said she was helpful and polite, but none offered her a permanent place in their home. When they no longer needed extra hands for chores, they asked the orphanage to send someone else the next time. They wanted a stronger worker, or a younger one, or someone who talked more. Lena never argued. She simply returned to the orphanage and resumed her tasks. Sundays were always the hardest. The town church, filled with families who sat together in long wooden pews. Lena always sat alone at the back, hands folded, eyes lowered. She watched people her age, girls with bright ribbons in their hair and boys who wore boots polished by their fathers, sit proudly beside their parents. She watched engaged couples whisper excited hopes for their futures. She watched newly married couples glowing with joy. She was happy for them, but she could not ignore the empty space beside her, a constant reminder of what she did not have. Whenever townspeople glanced back at her during the service, their expressions were gentle but distant, as if she were someone they pitied from afar but did not wish to approach. No one sat beside her. No one asked how she was doing. No one invited her for Sunday lunch. She slipped out quietly the moment the service ended, walking home with her head down so she would not see the curious eyes following her. The caretakers saw the loneliness in her eyes, though she never spoke about it. They knew the rule: At 18, the orphanage could no longer keep her. They were kind women, but they could not bend the policies. They began encouraging her to find work, any work, before her birthday came. "You're strong," they told her. "You'll find something." Lena nodded each time, though the truth frightened her. She had little money, no family, and no place to go. With limited options, she began cleaning stalls at a ranch outside town. It was hard labor, but she was grateful for the coins she earned. She woke before the sun rose, walked several miles to the ranch, and worked through dust, sweat, and the smell of animals. Still, she greeted the horses gently, humming softly as she brushed their coats. Even in the hardest moments, she searched for small joys. The ranch hands were mostly kind, though some teased her lightly about being the orphan girl. Their words weren't cruel, but they still carried an uncomfortable sting every time she heard them. She wished they would use her name instead, but she never corrected them. She didn't want to cause trouble or appear ungrateful for the work. People in town still spoke about her in quiet tones. Some said she was unlucky. Others said she was too plain or too quiet to attract any suitor. A few whispered that she must be hiding something from her past, though she had no past to hide. None of the rumors were harmful, but they created distance between her and the rest of the town, making her feel even more alone. Despite all of this, Lena tried to remain hopeful. She believed that somewhere in the world there had to be a place where she belonged, even if she had not found it yet. She believed that simple kindness could create unexpected changes. She believed that people, even strangers, held goodness inside them. She held tightly to those thoughts, because they were all she had. Every night, she lay in her narrow orphanage bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft breathing of the younger girls around her. She knew she would miss them, their chatter, their laughter, even their occasional arguments. This had been her home, for better or worse. Soon she would have to leave it behind and step into a life she had no map for. Lena didn't know what her future held. She only knew that the world had not wanted her yet. Not as a daughter, not as a bride, not even as a friend. But she carried something stronger than all the rejections she had faced. A gentle spirit, a quiet determination, and a hope that refused to die, even on the days she felt forgotten. And it was that hope, soft but steady, that would one day lead her toward a person who would change everything. The one person who would see her, truly see her, when no one else ever had. Lena first met Eli Turner on a warm afternoon near the edge of town, though she didn't know his name at the time. She was walking back from the ranch, where she cleaned stalls, her clothes dusty and her feet aching. The sun had been unforgiving that day, and she paused under a small tree to rest for a moment before continuing her long walk back to the orphanage. As she stood there, catching her breath, she heard the soft trotting of hooves on the dirt road. A horse approached slowly, guided by a man wearing a worn brown hat and boots that looked older than the road itself. His clothes were simple, patched in a few places, but neatly kept. His face was tanned from long days under the sun, and his eyes held a calmness that seemed rare in the busy world around them. He didn't look wealthy, but there was something honest and steady about him. "Afternoon," he said gently as he passed by. Lena nodded politely, unsure if she should say more. She wasn't used to strangers greeting her with such warmth. Usually, people only spoke to her if they needed help or had a task for her to do. But this man slowed his horse and offered her a soft smile, as though he recognized her from somewhere. "You work up at the ranch near the hill, don't you?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded again. "Yes, sir. I help clean the stalls." "Hard work," he said kindly. "You're doing well, I'm sure." With that, he tipped his hat and continued on his way. The encounter lasted only a few moments, but Lena found herself thinking about it during her walk home. It wasn't the words that stayed with her, it was the tone. Gentle, respectful, No pity, no discomfort, just simple, human kindness. Something she rarely received. She didn't expect to see him again. So when she spotted him at the ranch a week later, she felt a quiet surprise. He arrived early in the morning with a bag of feed over his shoulder, walking toward the barn as though he knew the ranch well. The other ranch hands greeted him cheerfully, calling him by name. "That's Eli," one of them whispered to Lena when he noticed her watching. "Owns a little ranch west of town. Not much money, but he's a good fellow. Helps people when he can." Lena nodded, pretending she wasn't curious. Yet when Eli walked past her later while she swept the barn floor, he paused again. "You're working early today," he remarked, noticing the dust on her sleeves. "I start early most days," she answered softly. "There's a lot to do." He studied her for a moment, not judging, just observing. "You do it well." It was a simple statement, but it warmed her more than she expected. Compliments were rare in her life. Most people saw her as quiet, plain, or simply part of the work. But Eli spoke to her as if she mattered. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed often. Sometimes he brought extra feed to the ranch, and other times he came only to help his friend repair a fence or check on a horse. Every time he saw Lena, he greeted her with genuine interest, asking small questions about her day or offering help with heavy tasks. He noticed little things like how she struggled to lift a water bucket that was too full. Without making a fuss, he would take the other end, or gently guide the bucket so she didn't strain her back. He never spoke loudly, never boasted, never acted superior. One afternoon, she was sweeping hay from the barn floor when he approached carrying a small basket. "These are fresh eggs," he told her. "My hens laid more than I can use this week. Thought you might like some." Lena froze. No one in town had ever brought her food. The caretakers sometimes received donations, but people rarely gave something directly to her. I don't have money to pay you," she said quietly, feeling embarrassed. "It's not for sale," Eli said with a gentle smile. "Just a gift. You work hard. Hard workers deserve something good now and then." She took the basket carefully, as though it might break. "You're welcome," he replied before returning to his work. For the first time in a long while, she felt noticed not as the orphan girl, but as a person with worth. But not everyone approved. Some ranch hands laughed behind Eli's back, whispering that he was wasting his kindness on someone who brought nothing but trouble. Others told him he should be careful, saying that helping Lena too much would only bring attention from people who believed she was unlucky. These were the same rumors she had heard whispered her entire life. Rumors with no real reason behind them, yet powerful enough to shape people's opinions. Eli didn't seem bothered. When he heard the whispers, he simply shrugged and continued treating Lena with the same respect as always. He didn't argue with anyone or try to change their beliefs. He just ignored them. Lena noticed this, and it confused her. Most people in town tried to fit in, tried to avoid gossip, tried not to stand out. But Eli didn't seem concerned about what others thought. He stood apart from the noise, steady and calm. One morning, rain poured down heavily, turning the dirt paths into soft mud. Lena slipped twice on her walk to the ranch. When she finally arrived, soaked from head to toe, she told the ranch owner she was ready to work. Before she could start, a familiar voice called out from behind her. "You shouldn't walk all that distance alone in this weather," Eli said, stepping closer. "Didn't anyone offer you a ride?" "Two." She shook her head. "People don't usually notice me." "Well, I noticed," he said quietly. "If it rains again, let me know. I come this way often." She didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to being offered help before she asked for it. She wasn't even used to asking at all. Her throat tightened, not with sadness but with a strange mix of gratitude and disbelief. From that day on, Eli made small efforts to make her life easier. Sometimes he carried a bucket for her without being asked. Other times, he left a small bag of vegetables near her tools, with a simple note that said, "For you, eat well." He never made a big deal of it. He never drew attention to his kindness. He simply gave what he could, quietly and consistently. It wasn't long before Lena began noticing details about him too. She saw how he treated his horse with gentle hands and soft words. She watched him mend fences patiently, never rushing, never frustrated. She listened to the way he spoke to the ranch hands with respect, even when they joked about his old boots or his modest ranch. One day, while brushing a mare, she overheard two men talking nearby. "Eli works harder than anyone I know," one said. "Still, he barely makes enough to keep his place running. He doesn't complain, though," the other replied. "He's quiet, but he's solid. You can trust a man like that." Lena looked at Eli from across the barn. He didn't know she heard the conversation, but she felt something shift inside her. He was poor, yes. He owned little, yes. But he had something more valuable: honesty, patience, and a gentle heart. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Lena realized she looked forward to seeing him. His presence made the long hours feel lighter, the chores less tiring, and the loneliness less heavy. She didn't know what he thought about her, but she knew he saw her, really saw her in a way no one else ever had. And though she didn't yet understand where this growing connection was leading, she sensed something was changing. Her life, which had always felt like a quiet shadow drifting through town, was beginning to gain warmth, color, and a small spark of hope, all because of a quiet, kind rancher who never treated her as less than anyone else. Little did she know, their story was only just beginning. The evening that changed Lena's life began like any other. Quiet and ordinary. She had finished a long day at the ranch, brushing horses, cleaning stalls, and helping stack feed. Her hands were sore, her clothes dusty, and her legs so tired she felt she might collapse. Work, no matter how hard, felt better than sitting inside the orphanage with nothing to do and too much time to think about the future. She walked toward the barn to put away a broom when the matron from the orphanage arrived unexpectedly. The woman's expression was kind but uneasy, and Lena sensed something was wrong even before she walked closer. "Lena," the matron called softly, "do you have a moment?" Lena wiped her hands on her apron and stepped forward. "Yes, ma'am. Is everything all right?" The matron hesitated, as though choosing her words carefully. "We need to talk privately." They moved to the quiet side of the barn, where the setting sun cast long shadows across the ground. Horses neighed softly from their stalls, and the scent of hay hung heavy in the air. Lena waited patiently, though her heart beat a little faster. "You know your 18th birthday is coming soon," the matron began. Lena nodded. She had been thinking about it constantly, though she tried not to show how frightened she was. "At 18, the matron continued gently, the orphanage can no longer keep you. We've stretched the rules as much as we can. You've been so helpful all these years, but there are new children coming in, and we need the space." Lena lowered her gaze. She already knew the rules, but hearing them out loud felt like a door closing behind her. The matron reached out and touched her arm. "I wish we could do more for you, but you need to find a place to live, a real place. And soon." "How soon?" Lena whispered. "1 week," the matron replied softly. "After that, you must leave." Lena felt the world tilt slightly, as though the ground was no longer steady beneath her feet. 1 week, 7 days. After 18 years of having nowhere else to go, she would be on her own. "I understand," she said quietly, though inside she felt anything but calm. "I'm sorry," the matron said again. "You're a good girl. You deserve better than this." Lena gave a weak smile. "Thank you." The matron left soon after, leaving Lena alone beside the barn. She tried to breathe normally, but her heart was racing. She felt small, fragile, and more alone than she ever had. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. and she quickly stepped behind the barn, where no one would see her. She sat down on an old wooden crate, burying her face in her hands. She cried silently, her shoulders shaking. Her future stretched before her like a cold, empty road. No home, no family, no place to stay. No one waiting for her, anywhere. She didn't know how long she sat there. The sky slowly turned from gold to soft gray, and cool evening air settled over the ranch. She tried to wipe her tears, but they kept coming. Then, she heard footsteps approaching, slow, careful, as though the person wasn't sure if they should come closer. "Lena?" A familiar voice called gently. She froze. It was Eli. She quickly wiped her face with her sleeve and stood up, hoping the shadows hid her tears. Eli stepped into the fading light. When he saw her red eyes, the smile on his face faded. He stopped a few steps away, giving her space but looking deeply concerned. "Someone said they saw you come back here," he said softly. "I wanted to check if you were all right." "I'm fine," she whispered. But her voice trembled, and Eli heard it. He took a slow step closer. "Lena," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "what happened?" She shook her head. "It's nothing. Just a long day." He didn't believe her. Anyone could see she had been crying. But he waited patiently, not pushing, not demanding. That single moment of quiet respect broke the wall she had tried to hold up. She sank back onto the crate and whispered, "I have to leave the orphanage." Eli's brows furrowed. "Leave? Why?" "My birthday is next week," she explained, her voice barely audible. "They can't keep me anymore. It's the rule." He walked closer and crouched in front of her, his eyes focused on hers with deep concern. "Do you have somewhere to go?" She shook her head slowly. "No." Eli's hands curled slightly at his sides, as though he wished he could fix everything with one touch. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't have family. I don't have money. I can't live at the ranch. And I can't stay at the orphanage." Tears filled her eyes again. "I don't know what to do." Eli looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Something serious and determined. He stood up slowly, took a deep breath, and then sat beside her on the crate. "Lena," he began, his voice steady. "I know I don't have much. My ranch is small. My house is simple. I don't have fine clothes or big savings. But," he paused, gathering courage, "I can offer you something." She turned her head slightly, confused. "What do you mean?" He looked at his hands before meeting her eyes again. "I can give you a home. A place where you won't be sent away. A place where you belong." "We." Lena blinked, unsure if she understood. I don't understand." He swallowed, his voice soft but clear. "If you'll have me, if you're willing, I can give you my last name. I can marry you." The world seemed to still. Even the evening breeze felt quiet, as though the air itself was holding its breath. Lena stared at him, shocked. Marriage? To him? It felt impossible, unreal. No one had ever offered her anything close to that. "Eli, you don't have to do that," she whispered, trembling. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," he said firmly. "This isn't because I feel forced. It's because I care about you. I, 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 I. Her breath caught. "Care? About me?" "Yes," he said simply. "I've cared about you for a long time. You're kind. You're honest. You work harder than anyone I've ever met. And you deserve someone who sees that. I do." Lena felt her heart beating so fast it almost hurt. For years, she had been invisible to the world. And now someone was offering her the very thing she never dared imagine: a place, a family, a future. "But your life is hard," she whispered. "Your ranch, It doesn't make much. I would only be a burden. Eli shook his head. You could never be a burden. I need help at the ranch, and I would trust no one more than you to share that life with me. She looked down, tears falling silently. I don't know how to be a wife. We would learn together, he said softly. All I'm offering is safety, honesty, and a name you can call yours. The rest, we take one day at a time. She lifted her eyes to his, seeing only sincerity and warmth. No pity, no hesitation, just a quiet, steady promise. Her heart, which had felt so heavy moments ago, softened in a way she had never known. Eli, she whispered, her voice trembling. Yes, I'll marry you. His eyes softened with relief, and a small smile touched his lips, gentle, grateful, full of warmth. Then you'll never face the world alone again, he said quietly. The last light of the sun dipped behind the hills, but for the first time in Lena's life, the darkness didn't feel frightening. She wasn't stepping into an empty future anymore. She was stepping into a shared one. The first days after Lena and Eli married felt both new and overwhelming. Everything in Lena's life changed at once. The orphanage, with its familiar old walls and crowded rooms, was no longer her home. She now lived on Eli's small ranch, a quiet place surrounded by rolling fields, tall grass, and the soft sounds of animals instead of children's footsteps. She no longer slept in a narrow bed with thin blankets. She slept in a clean, simple room inside Eli's wooden house, where the air smelled like pine and the windows looked out over open land. But even with these new comforts, life was far from easy. Eli's ranch was small, and what little he owned required constant work. The fences needed fixing, the stable needed repairing, and the animals needed feeding every morning and evening. There were no helpers, no hired hands. Everything depended on the two of them. And so, from the very first morning after their marriage, Lena stepped into her new life with both excitement and worry. Eli woke early, before the sun fully rose. The sky was still a pale blue, and the air carried a cool softness. He knocked gently on her door. Lena, you awake? She had barely slept. Not from discomfort, but from the strange feeling of being in a place she now called home. She opened the door, rubbing her eyes. Yes, I'm awake. We have a long day ahead, Eli said with a small smile. But don't worry. We'll go slowly. They walked outside together. The ranch was quiet, except for the soft clucking of hens and the distant bleating of goats. Lena breathed in the freshness of the morning air. This land was simple, humble, and peaceful. It felt like a new beginning. The first task was feeding the animals. Eli showed her how to measure grain for the horses, how to scatter feed for the chickens, and how to guide the goats into their pen gently. Lena watched carefully, wanting to learn everything properly. You don't have to get it right on the first try, Eli said kindly. We'll learn together. But Lena wanted to be useful. She wanted to help, not slow him down. So, she tried her best. Even when the bucket felt too heavy, or the goats moved too quickly for her to keep up. Throughout the day, they worked side by side. Eli repaired a loose fence post, and Lena handed him the tools he needed. She swept the stable, while he checked the horses' hooves. They carried water, gathered eggs, and cleared fallen branches from the yard. Their clothes got dirty, and their hands became rough from the work. But neither complained. Yet the work wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was the whispers from the town. Word of their sudden marriage spread quickly. People had always talked about Lena before, but now they spoke even more. Some said Eli married her out of pity. Others said she accepted because she had nowhere to go. Some whispered that the match was strange, because Eli was a hard-working rancher, and Lena had no family or possessions. One afternoon, when Lena went into town to buy flour and vegetables, she overheard two women talking near the market stall. She married fast, one said. Too fast. Well, she needed a place to stay. And Eli needed help on his ranch, I suppose. They didn't speak harshly, but their tone carried the weight of quiet judgment. Lena lowered her gaze and walked away without saying anything. She wasn't angry, but she felt small again, like the invisible girl she had been for so many years. When she returned home, Eli noticed something was wrong. "You look tired," he said as he unloaded the groceries from her bag. "More than usual. Did something happen?" She hesitated. People were talking. Eli sighed softly. "They think—" Lena paused, struggling to find gentle words. "They think you married me only because you felt sorry for me." He stopped and looked at her seriously. "What do you think, Lena?" "I think you were kind to me," she whispered. "Kinder than anyone else." Eli shook his head gently. "I didn't marry you out of kindness. I married you because I believed we could build a life together. I saw your strength long before you saw mine, and I don't care what anyone else says. Bye." End quote. "With your meaning, bye." His words were steady, warm, and full of truth. Lena felt her heart soften. She realized that building a new life wasn't just about learning chores or adjusting to a new home. It was also about learning to trust herself and trust him. As the weeks passed, small victories began shaping their days. Lena learned how to milk a goat without spilling anything. She learned exactly how much grain to give each horse. She learned how to mend small tears in work clothes and how to bake simple bread that made the whole house smell warm and comforting. Eli, in turn, learned how much easier the ranch became with a partner. He no longer had to do everything alone. When he came home tired, Lena handed him a cup of warm tea. When he struggled with a stubborn fence, she helped hold the board steady. When he had a long day in the fields, she prepared simple meals so he could rest. They talked more, too. In the evenings, after the chores were done, they sat on the small wooden porch and watched the sky turn orange and gold. Lena told him stories about the orphanage, about the children she helped raise, the nights she spent studying by candlelight, the birthdays that passed quietly. Eli listened with full attention, never interrupting, always caring. He told her about his parents, who had died when he was young, leaving him the ranch. He shared how hard it was to keep the place running alone, how there were times he nearly lost hope, and how meeting her somehow made everything feel easier. One evening he said quietly, "I never had someone to come home to, until now." Lena's heart warmed at his words. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was part of something real, something steady, something gently growing. But the ranch still struggled. Their harvest season was small. The goats produced only enough milk for them to use and sell a little. They fixed fence after fence, but new repairs always appeared. Sometimes money was tight. Sometimes they weren't sure if they could afford everything they needed. Still, they didn't give up. Every challenge only brought them closer. They encouraged each other, helped each other, and shared every burden. One afternoon, after working for hours in the sun, Lena accidentally dropped a heavy bucket, spilling water everywhere. She froze, expecting Eli to worry or scold her. Instead, he gently picked up the bucket and said, Lena smiled weakly. "I'm still learning." "And I'm still learning too," he replied. "We'll get better together." Their simple life began to grow into something beautiful, not because it was easy, but because they faced every hardship side by side. Each day began with work, ended with quiet laughter or soft conversation, and carried the warm feeling of two people who finally felt they belonged somewhere. Slowly, the ranch began to improve. The hens laid more eggs. The goats grew healthier. The fields responded to the care they gave. Neighbors who once doubted their marriage began to notice how well they worked together. Lena found herself smiling more often. She no longer walked with her head down. She no longer felt like an orphan or an outsider. Every sunrise brought new purpose. Every sunset brought peace. and each passing day made her realize something deeper. She hadn't just accepted a husband or a home. She had found a life, a real life, something she had once believed she would never have. Lena woke up earlier than usual that morning. The sun had not yet risen, and the sky outside the small window was still dark. But she felt a soft warmth inside her chest. It was the same feeling she had begun to feel every day since she and Eli started building their life together. She lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch, the gentle snoring of Eli, the slow breathing of the old dog by the door, and the distant calls of the animals in the barn, waiting for the first light of day. She smiled as she thought about how far things had come. There had been a time when she felt she belonged nowhere. But now, even the silence of the early morning felt like home. She stretched, rose slowly, and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders before stepping out into the cool air. The ranch was peaceful, with only the soft shadows of the trees dancing across the ground. The grass sparkled with dew, and the sky held a faint glow as the sun prepared to rise. Lena walked toward the barn, remembering how shaky her hands used to be when she first arrived at the ranch. She could barely lift a bucket of water, and she had often worried she might disappoint Eli. But now she moved with confidence. She knew the routine. She knew the animals. And she knew her place in this life, something she had never understood before. As she reached the barn doors, the goats bleated softly, recognizing her steps. She laughed under her breath and opened the door gently, letting the fresh morning air drift inside. The animals greeted her as if she were a long-lost friend returning home. She fed them, checked their water, and brushed the youngest goat, which always followed her around, as if she were its mother. While she worked, she thought about the town and how people had slowly begun to change their view of her. In the beginning, they had whispered behind her back, wondering why the orphan girl had married a rancher with so little money. Some people acted as if she had done something wrong by trying to survive. She remembered feeling nervous every time she had to go to the market, knowing that eyes would watch her. Some filled with curiosity, others with criticism. But over time, those eyes softened. People began to see her efforts. They noticed how she helped the older women carry baskets, how she stitched clothes for children without asking for payment, and how she always greeted others with respect. Her kindness spread through the town quietly, just the way she lived. One morning, months earlier, the baker's wife had said something Lena would never forget. She had pressed a warm loaf of bread into Lena's hands and said, "You are a good woman, Lena. A strong one. This town is better with you in it." Lena had nearly cried. The sound of footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Eli walking toward her, his hair messy and his shirt half-buttoned. He looked tired, but content, the way a man looks when he knows he is doing something meaningful. "You're up early again," he said, smiling as he leaned against the barn door. Lena shrugged playfully. "Someone has to make sure these goats don't take over the whole ranch." Eli chuckled and stepped closer, gently brushing hay from her shoulder. She shook her head. "I like taking care of them. They make me feel needed." Eli looked at her with warm eyes, the kind that made her heart steady. "You were always needed, Lena. You just needed to be in the right place." She didn't reply, but she felt the truth in his words. After finishing their morning chores, they sat together on the porch with cups of warm tea. The sun had risen fully by then, painting the sky with soft shades of gold. The ranch looked beautiful, almost glowing under the new light. Birds sang from the trees, and the ranch dog lay between them, gently thumping its tail against the wooden floor. Lena looked out at the land spread before her, the fields they had planted together, the fences they had repaired, the small house they had slowly filled with warmth and handmade touches. It wasn't a grand ranch or a large farm. It didn't have great wealth or fancy things. But it held something far more precious. Peace, safety, belonging. She turned to Eli and said quietly, "Do you ever think life could have been different?" 5. Eli thought for a moment before answering. Maybe. But I don't think it would have been better. Everything we went through led us here. 3. Lena nodded slowly. She felt the same way. Every hardship, every lonely night, every moment she had felt abandoned, it had all pushed her toward becoming the person who could appreciate this life. Later that afternoon, a group of children from the town passed by the ranch. They waved excitedly at Lena, calling her name. She waved back, surprised at how natural it felt now. The children adored her because she always spoke kindly to them and sometimes shared small treats or stories about the ranch animals. There was no fear in their voices when they talked to her, no hesitation or judgment. Just simple innocence. She felt something warm settle in her heart as she watched them. A few hours later, one of the older women from town visited, bringing a basket of fruits. She insisted that Lena take them, saying they were extra, though Lena suspected she had picked them especially for her. They talked for a while about the upcoming town fair, and the woman asked if Lena would help decorate the hall. The request shocked her. No one had ever asked her to take part in community events before. When the woman left, Lena stood still for a moment, holding the basket close. Each small interaction reminded her that she truly belonged now. She wasn't just the orphan girl anymore. She was part of something bigger. As evening settled, she and Eli prepared dinner together. They laughed while chopping vegetables, teasing each other gently about whose cooking was better. It was a simple meal, but they enjoyed it as if it were a feast. Afterward, they stepped outside to watch the sunset, something they often did without speaking much. The sky slowly shifted from bright gold to deep orange, then to soft purple. The warm colors reflected in Lena's eyes, making them shine. She leaned her head on Eli's shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, holding her with a quiet protectiveness that needed no words. In that peaceful moment, Lena realized something deeply important. For so long, she had believed she needed a family to claim her, to make her feel worthy. But now she understood that family could be built, chosen, and nurtured. She and Eli had created a life together through hard work, trust, and gentle care. She lifted her head slightly and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a place to belong." Eli turned to her with a soft smile. "You made it a home, Lena. I just helped a little." She laughed softly, feeling tears rise, not of sadness, but of gratitude. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed, but Eli cupped her cheek, brushing away the last tear with his thumb. They stood like that until the sky darkened and the stars began to appear one by one. The ranch lights glowed warmly behind them, and the familiar sounds of the animals settling in for the night filled the air. Lena breathed deeply and felt a peace she had never known before. She knew that life would bring challenges again, nothing stayed easy forever. But she also knew she would never face those challenges alone. For the first time in her life, she belonged somewhere. She had a home. She had a name that someone had given her, not out of duty, but out of love. She had a future that felt bright, steady, and strong. And she had a man who had seen her worth when no one else had even looked her way. As the stars shimmered above them, Lena held Eli's hand tightly and whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "This is where I was meant to be." Their story was simple, but it was real. And it would continue just like the steady beating of their hearts, just like the rising and setting of the sun over the ranch they had built with their own hands. It was the life she had always hoped for, even when she had no words to describe it. A life where she was no longer the girl no one wanted. She was Lena Turner, loved, valued, and finally home.